I'm Katie Townsend. I'm the program director at Angelic Organics Learning Center. Angelic Organics Learning Center is the nonprofit partner of Angelic Organics Farm, which is a community-supported agriculture farm, and it's one of the largest ones in the Midwest.
And I'm Randy Mermel. I'm an on-farm educator here at Angelic Organics Learning Center. I've been working here with groups since 2007.
Hi, I'm Jessie Crow-Mermel. I'm also an on-farm educator here at Angelic Organics Learning Center, and we love sharing this farm with others. We look forward every year to groups of school children and people of all ages coming out to explore the farm, and we're excited to share the farm with you here today. We always like to start our tours in this location and make reference to our very unique weather vane that we have here at Angelic Organics Learning Center. So when we have groups out here at Angelic Organics Learning Center, people are usually curious as to why we have dolphins on our weather vane in a farm in the Midwest. And the reason that we have the dolphins as our kind of symbol of the farm is that it reminds us that what we do here on our farm, even in the middle of the Midwest, it has ripple effects to the larger ecosystem in the world. So here we're in the Rock River watershed. Nearby we have Kinnickinnic Creek. So whatever we do to the fields on our farm, whether it's applying organic materials to the fields, or if we were going to apply any kind of chemicals, which we choose not to do here, that's going to get in the waterways. It's going to get in the groundwater. It's going to leach into Kinnickinnic Creek. Kinnickinnic Creek flows into the Rock River. We know that the Rock River flows into the Mississippi River, and of course the Mississippi River flows into the Gulf of Mexico, where the dolphins live. And that, of course, connects to all the waterways throughout the world. So it's important to remind ourselves and the people who visit the farm that what we do here does have a greater impact beyond just the local food system, that the way we treat our soil and water has a large impact of the global ecosystem.
Well, first of all, I want to talk about this farm. This farm is not just one thing like crops, but it's really close to maybe what was out here 100 years ago. Farms had wild spaces, they had crops, and they had animals. Remember, the animals' manure goes into that organic system that we have been sharing about. So I don't want you to think most farms today are like this. This is a beautiful rarity, and they're eating my clothes. This is a beautiful, rare situation that a farm would have animals, crops, and wild spaces. So why do we have goats on a farm? Number one, manure. Number two, milk. Because hey, cheese, ice cream, who doesn't love that? Number three, meat. Number four, management. Goats are great land managers. They'll eat down weeds, and they also put down, of course, that manure into our fields. But I really love the fact that they're ambassadors. What would a farm tour be without our friendly goats? Children love them. They're great ambassadors to our farm. Another thing about goat milk and goat products, it's becoming more and more acceptable, more widely used. Just read a report on it the other day. And some of the reasons are, number one, there's less lactose in it. There's also structure to the milk, whether it be the fat globulars or other components of the milk that make it more digestible. It's a little lower than fat. It's super nutritious. It actually has more calcium in it than cow's milk. So there's a lot of great benefits other than the utter cuteness of having goats. There's a nice food product. And I even think goat cheeses can actually enter into school lunches.
Whenever I give farm tours, I like to bring our students to this oak savanna here and to show off our wild spaces, because I want our students to start to envision what northern Illinois and southern Wisconsin looked like prior to the pioneers coming. This is called our oak savanna, and it's an integral part to growing organic vegetables. It's a different way of thinking about farming. I asked the question, well, why wouldn't we just come and cut down all these trees, open it up, and we'd have a lot more area to grow in? Well, this provides a lot of habitat for beneficial insects we want on the farm, not only pollinators, but predatory bugs that are going to eat some of the pests that we have. It's also providing shade for our wonderful goats and our cattle. So when the heat of the summer, they can come in here and cool off. Happy goats give us better and more milk production. It's also providing habitat for birds of prey that can keep the rodents in check in the fields. It also teaches us a lot about soil building. So the leaves drop down and feed the life of the soil, and the soil feeds the trees, and everything runs in a cycle here. It's an integral part to growing vegetables, just like we have wild spaces that surround the farm. We have prairie plants that bring in beneficial insects. We have large prairie grasses like big bluestem that most of the biomass is in the soil. So it's protecting us from some of the chemicals that they use on a neighbor's farm. But I think that these trees here, there's an integral value beyond what they can give to human beings. Some of these trees are 200 years old. Across the road there on our Knick-Knick fields, we have some oaks that are bur oaks that are teetering on 300 years old. So when the indigenous people walked in this area, they were seedlings and saplings. And one of the roles of our goat livestock is what we call management. So what they're doing in here is they're eating some of the invasive plants that Europeans brought with them when they settled this area, like garlic mustard. They keep some of the other plants in check too. So it's more like an oak savanna, more open so sunlight can get down to the forest floor. If you look down the fence line here, you can see the difference between where the area that is maintained by the goats and the area that is overgrown with buckthorn and honeysuckle and multiflora rose, some of our main invasive plants, over here on the other side. So when these oaks drop their acorns, they will not regenerate on this side because there's not enough sunlight getting down to the forest floor.
We're standing here in what's really the heart of the farm. Farmer John Peterson is the owner of Angelic Organics CSA, and he's lived here on this farmstead since he was born. So he really grew up with farming being part of his whole livelihood and education. But back in the 1980s, when he was just a young man farming, the farming crisis hit and caused him to really reimagine the farm, developing it from what was a conventional dairy farm into something that was more life-sustaining as an organic farm, and also more livelihood-sustaining as a community-supported agriculture farm. CSAs, or community-supported agriculture, was really a new concept in the Midwest when John developed that in the early 1990s. And it helped to really bring life back into this farm. And you can see now the vivid colors of the buildings, the art that's on the farm, because for Farmer John, it's really more than just growing food. It's about growing community and also having the farm be something that is really a work of art and has its own personality and life to it.
Kids should know where their food comes from. That's one part of it. Kids should have a little involvement with the farm because this work that is bound to the earth, it helps to form people into responsible adults, because this is a big reality check day after day after day. So it's not just the idea of like where food comes from, it's good for kids to experience where it comes from and have some kind of involvement with where it comes from, because that kind of activity builds people up.
All right, I'd like to share a little bit about some of the care it takes to raise really great vegetables. You want to give them a head start. Conventional crops are mostly things like corn or soybean. The seeds are put directly in the ground. But a little bit more care is needed with growing vegetables. So we like to start our vegetables in the greenhouse, give them that head start, kind of like kindergarten, first grade, before they move out into the big field. And right now we are starting our cold weather crops. So our broccolis, cabbages, and cauliflowers, which will be harvested in September, October, they are now getting their head start. This greenhouse is continually being used to give crops a head start. So this extra piece of care is part of our farm operation.
This is sweet corn. This is our third planting, put in probably mid-May, and we spread compost or composted manure that came from the Learning Center animals. We spread it on these fields here, and we plowed under clover and alfalfa, so we had fabulous fertility. So this corn, this organic corn, is just grown with natural methods. And look at the stand, look at the color of the corn, and and every year we get crops of sweet corn like this. It's really quite a miracle. So
The best sweet corn I've ever tasted.
Yeah, that's my favorite. I love sweet corn.
It tastes like candy to me.
and it comes from the cattle herd, the manure, and which is kind of seasoned for several months, and then we spread it. And you got to spread it months in advance for when you harvest the corn, which we do. But the height, the color, a lot of that can be attributed to the aged manure that came from the Learning Center, and then the rest of it you could attribute to the clover and alfalfa that we plowed under. And here you go. We'll be harvesting this in 2 or 3 weeks. This right here will probably be a big ear in about 2.5 weeks. That's how fast it goes now. You don't hardly see a weed in there. You go, well, how's that? Well, some hand hoeing, some cultivating, there's a lot of systems that we use because we don't want weeds in our corn. The corn doesn't want weeds in the corn. The corn decides how the corn's going to be, and then we just do what it's telling us to do. That's what corn does. It tells us what to do, and we do it.
So we're going to look at 2 different types of farming systems. One is organic, and the other one is the conventional farm. This is organic, and you can tell there's some striking differences in the color alone.
We're going to analyze these 2 soils or compare them, and I'm going to be working with the conventional soil. And I guess if you want to really talk about the differences is that seed is planted in here, pretty much usually corn or soybean, and then a chemical fertilizer is applied, and when it rains, the roots take them down. What conventional farming does is feed the plant, but you also have to realize those plants are on a life support system.
And this is a system based on ecology, where everything runs in a cycle. So in the organic soil, what we're doing is we're feeding the life of the soil. We want to protect that life, and then the life of the soil feeds the plants, and the plants feed the people. And we feed that manure and green manures and compost.
So today, for our comparison, we're going to look at 5 different aspects of both of these soils. We're going to begin with color, and I'm going to just talk about the color I see with the conventional soil. We'll go over to Randy with organic, and we'll work through our chart today in comparison, and then we will put it all together in the end. So now I'm going to look at color and record the best I can to describe this color. And as I'm looking at it, I'm seeing light brown with almost a yellow tinge to it. So that's what I'm going to write down, brownish yellow. Randy, what do you see?
And as you start to look at the difference here with the organic soil, it's very dark. So we're going to say very, very dark in color. And we always ask our students, so what is the chemical element that is causing that to be so dark? And the answer would be carbon, because there's a lot of carbon in the organic material. So this means that this is filled with a lot of organic material that's breaking down here and providing that deep, dark, rich color. So I'm going to write dark in color in here.
Well, the next thing we're going to look at is texture. And texture is how much sand, silt, and clay, plus organic matter, you have in soil. Now, soils are mapped. So both the conventional soil and the organic soil started out with the same texture. They probably actually have the same soil name when they're mapped. What's different is how they've been farmed. So I'm going to start with the conventional. It feels pretty dry. Sometimes you might want to try it and make a ribbon if you can to see that it has the right components. It's pretty hard to put together a ribbon. It's a little bit crumbly. Randy.
So here in the organic soil, I've already pointed out that there's a lot of organic material in here because you can really tell that just by looking at the color. It's also very moist. So that's also an indication that we have more of a balance of your sand, silt, and clay. And that really refers to particle size. So sand would be the largest particle size. And in a system that's very sandy, you're not going to be able to hold those nutrients in the system or your water in the system. It's going to really run out. So, and in a very clay system, as you can tell that with this conventional system here, it's pretty clay, water might just stay on top and not penetrate into the root zone, what we want for growing good, healthy vegetables. So this is really a balance of those particle sizes. Clay being the smallest particle size, the medium particle size would be your silt.
And that's a great segue to talking about structure. Because structure now is talking about clumping, compactability. Randy already started. If you're looking at the conventional soil, you're going to see there's a lot more clumping. My roots would have a hard time with that. So you can see that structure between these two equal soils are very different right now.
So, and in our organic soil here, you can see that these clumps break up very easily, just a little bit of touch. So our plants are going to get what they need because the roots are going to be able to penetrate down deep into the subsoil there too, and it's going to be really nice and a real nice growing medium for us.
Okay, this might sound funny, but it's good to smell your soil. Some people say it's even good to taste your soil. So Randy and I are going to do the sniff tests on our soil and try to describe what our soil might smell like. I'm going to begin. My soil doesn't have much of a smell, but I'd have to say, this is going to sound very funny, that it almost has a little bit of a chemical smell, like a light air freshener, which probably has a lot to do with the fertilizer or possibly the pesticide application. So I would say kind of neutral to maybe light chemical is how I'm going to describe the smell of my soil.
Okay, and now I'm going to give a nice whiff of this organic soil. It smells very earthy. Smells alive. So it really smells very rich in earth.
Okay, the next thing is the worm test. Again, we're now smelling soil, we're moving to worm test. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of farmer folklore. Farmers, in the olden days, would a lot of times take a scoop of soil and you're looking for the 6-worm scoop. Because worms indicate that there's a lot of life, there's a lot of, they can penetrate, it's talking about health. So in July, it's very ambitious to do a worm test, but we're going to try. And remembering, the gold standard is 6 worms. A lot of times the worms are going to move farther down when it's drier. We haven't had rain for a couple days, so we are a little bit ambitious here. I'm not finding any worms. How about you, Randy?
I'm not seeing anything in here, but like you said, it hasn't rained in a while. If we went down maybe a little bit deeper, we'd start to see more worms.
And being a scientist, I tried to be really fair. I just did a shovel scoop down. So I think that's the explanation. But I also think it's a great opportunity to say that sometimes folklore doesn't tell the whole story. So you want to actually be looking for, and probably nowadays, analysis would talk a little bit more about the very last category, which is other living things. A lot of those other living things we can't see, but there's clues, like roots, or maybe just looking to see if we see any movement and that type of stuff. So Randy, let's see if we could find other indicators of life.
So in good healthy soil, you're going to see nematodes, you're going to see a lot of worms. I say you should have at least 10 worms in your garden in a square foot. But like Katie says, if I take a hand, there's billions and billions of life in here that we can't see with our eye, but we know they're in there, the bacteria, right? So again, we're feeding that life of the soil, and the soil is feeding the plants. This is very much alive.
And I think I would like to try to just add, I'm not finding a lot of root hairs in mine, and I think if we could have a microscope out here and pull out a root or a root hair, we'd marvel at the amount of life that we could find. And I don't have root hairs, and I'm a little jealous sitting next to Randy because I could see that there's quite a bit of that kind of life and action in his sample. And I would say one thing I'd like to share too is back to my opening thought that when you grow conventionally, your plants are on life support. And a lot of times too, that when it rains or after you've applied it, it'll leach down into the soil and then sometimes into other places we don't want it, like groundwater or water. But it also creates a cycle of continual application.
So as Katie's saying, that this is a system based on inputs and outputs, where in the organic system, it runs in a cycle. We're working with the ecology. So the animals and the manure feed the soil, and the soil feeds the plants feed the animals and the people, and we again feed the soil. So everything here in this system runs in a cycle. So we always ask our students when we're finished up here, which soil would you rather eat out of?
Tell me what you got.
We just did a carrot harvest.
But he said the way to transform the world is by strengthening the farms. It's very interesting. He's really committed to that. And to take it out of like, what's in it for me and how cheap will my food be, and into like, let's empower these farms so that they can start to emanate that kind of healing energy needed.
We're currently in the process of putting up this electric fence. So this is a solar-powered electric fence that is protecting our corn from raccoons and deer. So it's another way that we can protect our plants and not use chemicals. So what we're looking at here is one of the most important crops we have on the farm, and we don't even eat it personally. These are called cover crops or green manure. So the 60 acres here in our fields that we dedicate to growing vegetables, half are always put into cover crops. 2 years cover crops and 2 years vegetables, rotating. Now these are providing a lot of different services for us. One thing they're doing is they're bringing up nutrients from the subsoil. They're also going to be plowed under and adding organic material to the soil. So they're going to feed the life of the soil. So all this is going to be plowed under. We're going to add organic material to the soil. It's also preventing erosion. We've lost so much topsoil in this country, and this is a conservation method of preserving and protecting our number one resource, right? Our soil. This is also going to break up our weed cycles and our pest cycles, so we don't have to use those chemicals, the poisons, to kill pests. So what we have here is alfalfa, we have some timothy, we also have some clover in here as a cover crop. So what we're going to do is plow this under before we plant vegetables into it. So we're going to give it a good boost of organic material that's going to feed the soil and the life of the soil, and the life of the soil is going to again feed our crops. We're also bringing in these beneficial insects, pollinators. We can see that there's some bees here on these flowers, on these alfalfa flowers. So we're not only drawing in pollinator insects that we want on the farm, but also predatory insects like this beautiful ladybug that's going to feed on aphids that feed on our plants. So the other thing that this does for us is it allows us to rest the fields. So as our vegetables come out of the fields, we're also removing some of the nutrients from the soil. because the nutrients are now in the plants. So this is going to give an opportunity for that soil to recover and make it healthy again. Again, we're soil farmers.
If we're not using chemicals as fertilizer, we need to get that fertilizer somewhere else. And we did talk about compost and manure, but another way is to grab nitrogen from the atmosphere and get into a usable form. So if you were to go and buy fertilizer, it would have NPK, which talks about nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. This is the nitrogen part, called nitrogen fixation. It's another natural cycle that we use here to create fertile soil that grows superior vegetables. Right now I'm holding on to an alfalfa plant, and we're looking at a small miracle, and that is basically a bacteria nodule on the root area, and this is a symbiotic relationship. And that relationship is that it takes nitrogen out of the atmosphere and helps get it into a usable form. Plants can't take nitrogen from the air. Remember, I talked about getting it into a usable form. So these bacteria fix the nitrogen in a usable form, once again, for plants and animals.
And the final benefit of this plant, this is alfalfa, we grow it for forage for our animals, for our goats and for our cattle. So again, the plants are going to feed the animals, and then we'll take their manure and compost it and feed the soil. The soil is going to feed the plants, and everything here runs in a cycle. So one of the main questions we get here at Angelic Organics is, how do we protect our plants from pests if we don't use poisons or chemicals? The first line of defense is to create healthy soil. So if we have healthy soil, we're going to have healthy plants. And those plants are going to be able to resist infestations or diseases. Just like if we're eating a healthy, balanced diet, we can fight off diseases also.
In addition to being soil farmers, as Randy alluded to, we're also students of nature. So we look to our oak savanna and our wild spaces as inspiration, because there's so much diversity, so much biodiversity, life that's happening all around us, interactions and connections that are happening. So when we farm, we want to emulate that diversity on our farm. So unlike the conventional farms surrounding us that are planting monocultures or one crop, we like to plant a plethora of different flowers and herbs and vegetables. And even within our vegetables, we're not just growing one kind of tomato, we're growing many kinds of tomatoes. So if there is a disease or a blight that happens on our farm, it's usually not going to affect everything because there's so much genetic diversity in all of our plants. And when we have this biodiversity in our plants, it's also going to attract lots of different kinds of beneficial insects, which are going to help pollinate and protect our plants from predation.
Another way we protect our plants is called crop rotations. You'll never see the same plant growing in the same bed year after year. We move things around to confuse those bugs. So tomatoes that are growing over in this field here, the next year they're going to be grown about a mile away. So when those aphids lay their eggs and hatch, the tomatoes have gone to another spot of the farm, so there's nothing for them to eat. We also start a lot of our plants under row covers. So we're protecting our squash, our watermelon from those squash bugs. So plants can get moisture through those row covers and air and sunlight, all those things that plants need, but the pests can't get through. Flea beetles are a very tiny pest that we have on the farm that love to eat eggplant, and they eat the foliage. So we have to start and put our eggplant underneath these row covers. But our farmers, if you think about this, have to take the row covers off so the pollinators can get in to pollinate those flowers, like on a watermelon. And once we see that flower get pollinated and the fruit start to set and grow, we can put the row covers back on.
So it's obviously a lot of extra work to farm organically. We have to employ a lot more people here on this farm than our neighboring farms do. So what's the point when we have these chemicals that could help us decrease the time involved in farming? Well, all of the pesticides that is sprayed on crops and the chemical fertilizers and herbicides, that all leaves a residue on our food. And not all of that can get washed off. So that we're exposing people then to those chemicals that we know are biocides that kill the life in the soil. So why would we want to feed it to our kids?
So sampling is part of our field tours, and right now I have a green bean. Tastes great.
One of my favorite things about my job is getting students to sample vegetables that they've never tried before, or maybe they've just had it out of a can, and getting the to taste something fresh out of our fields. It's quite an experience.
The other thing that you can really taste when you're eating food fresh out of the fields is just how delicious and fresh it is, and that's because it's more nutrient dense. These foods haven't had to travel an average of 1,500 miles that most foods have to travel to reach our plate. So that's another real benefit of eating local and regional, is that your food is more nutrient dense because it hasn't been sitting in a truck for a week.
So the farm workers planted a bunch of flowers over there. They are you pick. We also have some green beans and spices.
All right, so we're standing here in front of the pack area of the CSA. And as you remember, CSA stands for Community Supported Agriculture. So this model is really pretty unique in that there are customers who come together at the beginning of the growing season and buy a share of vegetables. This helps the farmer because then they know exactly how many people to be growing food for. It helps because they have their money ahead of time so they can make necessary repairs on equipment, buy seeds, and that kind of thing. And then the benefit to the customer is that they will be getting a share of fresh vegetables every week of the growing season. And the boxes, which are 3/4 of a bushel, are going to vary from week to week with whatever is coming out of the fields. Fresh, delicious, and nutritious. It's also helpful because it really helps develop a relationship between the eaters and the farmers. Usually when you go to the grocery store, maybe you see a sticker on the produce that shows you what country that produce came from, but that's about all you know. And when you buy from a farmer, then you know exactly where the food is coming from, how the soil was treated, how the animals were treated, and you're developing a relationship with the local economy and the farmer that's providing your food.
I'm just here once a week. Most everyone here is a volunteer, and at the end of our pack, we get to pack our own box of food to take home. Today I'm just going to be closing the boxes, and at the end of the day I'm going to take home some of everything.
So I can show you, this is where I box the boxes. This way, this way. So these are the Wednesday boxes, and those are the Tuesday boxes, and these are in order of for delivery already.
I can do that.
A lot of cleaning and grading of the vegetables that go on here. Ice machine here. There's some oversized zucchini and summer squash given to the crew as a barrel washer for potatoes and carrots. So all the vegetables have to be cleaned in one way or another, processed, examined again after they come from the field usually, and then they go under the pack line, and then they go off to our customers.
So here at Angelic Organics Learning Center, the chickens are an integral part of the farm organism. Actually, I think of them as the sanitation crew. They're coming through here and eating up parasites, and they're keeping the bug population in check. So they provide for us a service, right? And they're part of that whole concept of the farm fitting together. So they're giving us not only eggs and meat and manure, but they're also eating the grass, keeping the grass mowed, and eating those bad bugs we might not want on the farm. So these chicks came to our farm about 4 weeks ago or so, and they won't be laying eggs till about 6 months. So when a chicken is doing what it's supposed to naturally, like eating bugs out here outside, eating the grass, the eggs are a lot healthier. So if they're doing what they're supposed to naturally. So they have more vitamins, less cholesterol, better omegas, more vitamin E. So an organic egg is of course much healthier than an egg that you would get from a factory farm, where a chicken might live its entire life in a little cage, a battery about this size. So there are predators out here, and chicken is very tasty, so there are a lot of predators out here that might want to get in at our chickens. So we have built this out of old pallets that we got from Angelic Organics. We put a chicken fence up here, and then at night when predators are quite active, we do lock them into their coop. So we do have a door over here, and then they go into their coop, and we're able to shut them in so they're safe from predators during the night. So there are some nesting boxes in this coop. They also like to sleep on a ladder, right? Chickens evolved in the forest, so they originally used to live up in trees and sleep up in trees at night. So we have a roost for them to sleep on.
And we always like to wrap up our experience by asking the question, what will you take away from our farm tour?
So when you visit a farm like ours, or you begin to have a relationship with your farmer, you start to see that there are benefits that go beyond just your own health. You're supporting a community of farmers and beautiful spaces like this, and also there's benefits that go beyond protecting and preserving the environment.
I think it really comes down to, what is the definition of good food? Good food tastes good, it's nutritious, it's good for the land, it's good for the animals, and I really think it comes down to you having a farm in your heart.